There's been a rise of conspiratorial mongering, even amongst conservatives. You and I need to talk about this because it's a serious problem. I'm Marcus Peter. So let's be honest. Americans didn't wake up one morning and decide to become conspiracy theorists. They were driven there. And I can acknowledge this. The mainstream media, it was once trusted to speak the truth to power, in fact. It's become a bad parody of itself because we've seen the slow collapse of credibility, and it began years ago.
President Biden will go down in history as one of the nation's greatest presidents, accomplishing more in nearly 4 years than most presidents do in 8 years.
The Biden era genuinely sealed that deal. And before you start saying this is moral attribution, that's nonsense. This is objective facts. Americans were told with a straight face, for example, that Joe Biden was sharp, steady, and fully fit for the presidency, that behind closed doors, he was faster and more astute than anyone else on the team.
Biden's being Biden's being an extremist.
But cameras were showing us the stumbles, the slurred words, the vacant stares, the constant fumbling of facts. And whenever you and I were questioning this, well, the press corps treated us like children who needed protecting from our own eyes. We were told that we were wrong, that what we were seeing was not true. They effectively, I don't like using this term because it's overused, but they were gaslighting the American people, and in fact, the people across the world. That's not journalism, my friends. That's gaslighting on a global scale. The Russian collusion narrative didn't help either.
Barack Obama, they're trying to downplay this, but there's one simple question they can't answer that stops them cold on this. They don't have the proof for this. They won't answer. What proof, what evidence do you have that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to help Russia hack Democrat emails? What proof do you have that Donald Trump colluded with Russia on propaganda, all to undercut Hillary Clinton by things like leveraging social media bots and paid ads? They won't answer it because they know Special Counsel Robert Mueller found the Trump campaign did not collude or conspire with Russia on election interference.
Years of breathless coverage about Donald Trump being a Kremlin asset that ended with the Mueller report fizzling like a damp firework because there was not a single shred of evidence that actually tied him to Moscow in that way. But the damage to public trust was incalculable. And then also the Hunter Biden laptop situation, we were told it was Russian disinformation. We were all sold that, right? But big tech, dutifully, they were told by the government, and so they did it. They throttled the story right before the 2020 election. And in fact, this has become common knowledge. Facebook admitted this. Meta admitted this. Only later, even the New York Times admit that it was authentic. And polls actually showed us that many voters would have at somewhat reconsidered their choice if they had known the full extent of the Biden family's dealings. But by then, the election was over, the press had moved on, and the next sermon was being preached to us. The other problem was the COVID issue. It only added fuel to this conspiratorial inferno, and this frustrates me because there were people who questioned things like lockdowns, lab origins, vaccine mandates, and this is not an anti-vax narrative. Yeah, I don't want to make this clear, but it's just that any questions that were presented were dismissed as unscientific cranks. Now, years later, Nature and the Wall Street Journal and numerous other publications concede that there was a lab leak, that theory is actually plausible, that masks, well, the Cochrane Review found no clear evidence that they made a measurable difference in how we conducted ourselves. School closures, they have been devastating for children. According to the CDC's own data, we're still reeling from the devastating effects of closing down our schools. And so every time a so-called conspiracy in the past, in at least recent history, turned out to have merit, it confirmed what millions had been suspecting, that the establishment was lying when it was convenient. But I also want to be careful. That doesn't mean that every single thing being fed to us is a lie. We can't live like that. Enter three people that are making the biggest headwaves in the conspiratorial sphere, right now, especially in the conservative realm. You've got Candace Owens, you've got Tucker Carlson, and you've got Alex Jones. Now, Candace is one such example, and she's been making headwaves for ludicrous claims. She doesn't invent this distrust, but she is harnessing it.
I want to say one more thing rather explosively. 3 people told me off record. 2 people who have this in a written communication from Charlie. One who is a Turning Point USA donor, and I would say very much one of the white knights in this. The very day before Charlie Kirk died, he expressed that he thought he was going to be killed.
I mean, what makes her and similar figures alluring is that conspiratorial reasoning provides a tidy explanation in a chaotic world. It uses valid premises, but it leaps to false conclusions. It's a textbook case of what you call post hoc reasoning, or confirmation bias, or the fallacy of composition. And the logic goes something like this. If you don't understand those terms, it's simply this. Since the media lied about A, they must be lying about B and C and D, and then it goes on. And before long, Israel, or some shadowy cabal, but typically these people, especially Tucker and Candace, they keep going back to Israel for some reason. They become the villain behind every curtain, lurking, pulling the strings.
I will never support Israel, right? So I went from working for PragerU to I will never support Israel. So that's how much the scales have fallen from my eyes about what they are involved in. And if this isn't your wake-up call to just look at the footage of what they are doing, they're playing Hunger Games and like throwing food at them and then killing people and seeing who survives. It's just at your fingertips. You have to take a look at what Israel is doing.
And these narratives are emotionally satisfying to many people because they replace uncertainty with false clarity. They replace outrage with a sense of belonging. Everyone else has it wrong, but me and my small cohort, we are the Gnostics who have it right. That's what we're being told here. And so the believer feels that they're part of an enlightened few because they alone see through the lies. Everyone else is mistaken. The problem is that this mindset is immune to correction. Because every time these people, including people like Candace Owens, when they're confronted with contrary evidence, the response is predictable. Every single time. The evidence is insufficient or the evidence is fabricated. That's not reason, my friends. That's a false fideism, and it's disguised as just asking questions. Disguised as, I'm just raising the issues. I'm just being a little skeptical. Christians, you and I have to resist this temptation. Conspiracy culture feeds the same pride that animated the serpent in Eden. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. It's a guilty pleasure, but it corrodes faith and it also corrodes our reason. Conspiracy mongers are difficult to befriend and reason with. My friends, the truth is often uncomfortable. Sometimes it's unjust. It's still the truth. And it's only that truth that will set us free. So our duty is not to connect imaginary dots. It's to conform our minds to reality as revealed by Scripture, illuminated by reason, ordered by natural law, and trust in divine providence. So yes, you and I will not get all the answers in this life, no matter how good the investigative journalism. But we can thank God that justice belongs to God. And so the rest, with all the conspiracies behind it, it's just noise that might even affect our eternal salvation. And we need to think about that. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.